Meeting. I want to thank the NEU Left for setting this up. I think it's a really important meeting. We are recording the meeting, so if you don't want to be on screen, please do turn your cameras off. We will just be recording our speakers and then we'll be stopping the recording. Several members have asked us if we can record it because they're not able to be here tonight. Just before we start and I go through what is going to happen during the meeting, I just want to remind people, this is a meeting that's been organised for NEU members to talk about the situation in Palestine and talk about more broadly what we can do and what we should be doing in our education settings. But we do expect people to behave appropriately. We expect people to be respectful. We've posted the NEU Code of Conduct, Behaviour Code of Conduct in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat. If anybody does behave in a way that is unacceptable, we will be removing people from the meeting. We think this is a really important discussion, but we do expect it to be held in an appropriate way. So please do check out that statement and make sure you are following that. I'm really pleased. We've got 4 great speakers. Unfortunately, Rana can't be with us tonight. She sent her apologies, but we still have 4 fantastic speakers. We have Muniza Khan, who is going to speak to us. She has attended a delegation with the National Education Union, or the National Union of Teachers as it was. Philipa Harvey, who is a past president of the National Union of Teachers, has been active for as long as I can remember, and I have known her around Palestine, and was involved in some teaching resources, setting up, going out filming, and I know she's going to talk about those teaching resources later, and we are in the process of updating those to be circulated. Naomi Wimborne-Idrissi, who many of you will know, has also attended a delegation with the union, but is very active in Jewish Voice for Labour and well known throughout the active left. And our final speaker will be Alex Snowdon, who is from Newcastle. He's a newly elected member of the PSC executive, but has been very active in the NEU, but has also been very active up in Newcastle, building support for the Palestinian cause, and has had 2 fantastic rallies. So congratulations, Alex. I've been watching those over the last couple of weeks. So obviously tonight's meeting is really to look at what we can do as educators in our schools and workplaces to make sure that we are not, sorry, somebody's just asked in the chat if Latifa's speaking. She was unable to join us tonight, so she isn't able to speak tonight. She was very apologetic. We had hoped she would be speaking. So obviously over the last couple of weeks, we have seen huge demonstrations in support of the Palestinian people. A week ago on Saturday, around 120,000, I think, and I think yesterday's demonstration in London was even bigger. But there have been demonstrations up and down the country in many places, around 80 places, huge outpouring really of concerns about what is happening, particularly around Gaza and the assaults on Gaza, but also the attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque and the forced removals of families from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah. And I'm sure many people will have never heard of Sheikh Jarrah before the last couple of weeks, but our members will have heard of it because we visit those families when we take delegations out, and we see the situation that they are living in on a daily basis. Just briefly, in terms of our delegations, I think, the legacy at the National Union of Teachers and now the National Education Union has had a very long commitment of support for the Palestinian people, right back to the 1980s. And there are people in this meeting tonight, Dave Harvey, I don't think Bernard Regan could be with us, Philipa Harvey, who I've mentioned, Kiri Tunks, who have been at the forefront of really pushing for our union to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And I will be forever grateful to those people for the work that they have done and raising my awareness, but also working to make sure that our members are aware of the situation. And those delegations have been really important that have taken place. And every single member that goes on a delegation that I have been on or that I know that has spoken to me about the delegation comes back committed to the cause to fight for the Palestinian people because of what they see and what they hear. When we are there, we meet with a lot of our key partners, the General Union of Palestinian Teachers, Defence for Children, International Palestine, but we also meet with organisations in Israel, activists who are campaigning against the occupation, who don't believe that what their government is doing is acceptable, and who are actively campaigning for Palestinian rights. This is not a new issue. So the last 2 weeks has seen a rise in activism around this, but this is a long-standing issue. Over 70 years, the Palestinian people have lived under occupation, and I could talk long about it, but I'm sure some of our speakers are going to talk about it, so I will not talk for much longer. But what I do want to say is the other thing that I have seen over the past couple of weeks is real concerns about the way that this is being handled in schools. And whatever the issue is, the best way to deal with issues is to talk in an open and honest way, to allow children and young people to talk about what they are seeing, what they are hearing, and to answer those questions knowledgeably, factually, and in a supportive way. And we will never resolve any conflicts across the spectrum, but particularly around Palestine, without allowing open and honest discussion and dialogue. And that is why we have called this meeting. We want our members to feel confident to tackle this issue, to talk about what children and young people are seeing, and that they are out there seeing what is happening, but to be able to talk to us as education workers about it, and for us to be able to respond appropriately and confidently, and know that we are giving them good information that they can take away and use. Because what we don't want, and this is my sort of final point, is some of the images we saw of absolutely horrific anti-Semitic behaviour that we have to challenge and call out. So whilst we stand firmly with the Palestinians who are oppressed, we call out all oppression wherever we see it, and anti-Semitic behaviour is never going to be tolerated by us or any of us in our union, and that is important. So we have to, give people the tools they need to deal with this in a confident way, and that is what our speakers will be covering tonight. So I'm really pleased to introduce our first speaker, Muniza Khan, who has been on a delegation to Palestine with the union and came back, and I'm sure she's going to tell us not only about her experience but also about what she did on her return.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you everyone so much for attending this evening. This is a really important topic, and I feel that, as Louise has, made some really, really excellent points about the discussions around, what we do as educators in school. So I went on the delegation in 2018, and it was extremely educational. There was just, as Louise was saying, we were meeting with so many different organisations, so many different people, Palestinian, Jewish, and it was really eye-opening and insightful as an educator and as a teacher, visiting schools out there as well. So the way that I sort of approached it with my school, because obviously we all know that this is quite a topic that people get extremely passionate about on sort of both sides. So I spoke to my head teacher before going on the delegation and informed her that I was going. She was extremely supportive, and one of the things that I asked her before I went was, would it be okay when I come back to have an assembly with the different year groups to talk about my trip, to talk about the delegation, and talk about what I'd seen out there and experienced and things like that. My head teacher was very, very supportive. And so once I came back, I had another meeting with her and we had a discussion about it. And one of the things that I was, a bit nervous about, I think, was obviously being of Muslim faith and then going over to Palestine. I did sort of feel nervous in the sense that I wanted to make sure that I was talking about the issue in a way that you know, was understood, because it wasn't, for me, it's not sort of a Muslim and a Jewish thing, and I really wanted that to be clear. And I was really lucky that within my department at school, so I'm teaching English, there was a Jewish teacher who was really good friends. We were both really, really good friends, and she was also aware that I was going on the delegation. And so when I came back from Palestine, we actually met, we sat down, we had a discussion, and she sort of, you know, expressed that she would actually like to be part of the assembly and part of the discussion with me. And so we had you know, we worked together, we came up with a presentation, and one of the things that we both said was that we wanted to keep it very factual. So this wasn't about emotions, you know, it wasn't about her being Jewish and sort of or me being Muslim, but it was very much about the situation out there and what's going on. But we also felt that in terms of educating our students, the fact that she is Jewish and the fact that I am Muslim, and that together we're doing this sort of presentation would be really, really helpful. So we did do that, and it was, you know, we had students coming up to us afterwards and having discussions with us, and they were really, really pleased that we'd done this, because so many of them had questions. And similarly now, with the situation that's going on, you know, I've had students approach me at school and asking questions about it. And I think what Louise was just saying about, you know, it's not a conversation that we can avoid. Students are very aware of what's going on in the news. They've got social media, they've got all of these, you know, this access to sort of what's going on. And if we're not addressing it in school, then actually I think that's where potentially we're looking at sort of we need to be able to address the questions that young people have. They don't, you know, they need that support in terms of understanding what's going on. So doing that assembly with the students, I found really, really helpful. Another thing that we did as a school was we are working with Palestine Solidarity Campaign. We actually had a group of 15 Palestinian footballers, so girls who play football out in Palestine, who came over to the UK for a visit. And as a school, we hosted those girls, and that was actually, I think it was the same year that I did the assembly as well. And so what we actually had was the girls coming in, you know, playing football with our students, and then we were able to have a group of our students with the girls who met together and had a discussion around, you know, just a discussion around football. And it wasn't anything about, you know, it was a time for those students and our students to get to know each other. But also because I'd already done the assembly, the students were aware of the situation and had a lot of questions, and it was really educational for them as well. So what I would say, you know, as a teacher and an educator, that, you know, there is you know, a lot, as I say, passion on both sides, and I feel that it's really, really important that we speak with facts. So everything that you know, I had in my presentation about the trip, it was all factual. There was no emotion in there. It was very much about what I'd seen, what I'd experienced, and what was actually going on. And I feel that for our students and for the staff members as well, because I've spoken about students talking about it, but actually staff members had discussions with myself and my colleague as well, and really open and honest discussions. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of share my experience in terms of going out there and coming back and sort of having those conversations in schools as well.
Thanks so much, Muniza, and such an important point. And actually, it's lovely to hear about the children that you brought, the football group that you brought over. And I think those sort of links are really important. And I know Julia in Bolton, one of our members who is a previous Steve Sinnott Award winner, I think. She has been bringing students over from one of the refugee camps, and you know, the work that she has done to help children to build up links has been really important. And I think your example is a really good one. And actually it follows on very nicely to Philipa Harvey. So Philipa Harvey and Kiri Tunks, and I'm sorry Kiri can't be here to talk about it as well, both past presidents of our union, but both very long-standing activists around this issue, produced a series of films jointly with the GUPT and some with a company called Educid, and teaching materials to be used in schools. They were done when we were the NUT. They are absolutely fantastic resources. I can't commend them to you enough, really. And I know Philipa is working very hard to amend them now so that we can reissue them. But I am going to post a link to all of the films if Philipa wants me to put all of them. I have got all, yes, even the EduKid joint ones. Yeah, she's nodding. But one of the films is called Just Like Us. And when you were talking, it just sort of reminded me of that, because, you know, that's what young people are like. But they're all just like each other, and they like talking to each other and finding out about each other. So anyway, Philipa, I'm going to hand over to you, and then I will find the films and post them in the chat for people.
Thanks, Louise. So as Louise said, I first went in 2013 and I've been a number of times since. And every time you go, and anybody else who's been will always tell you that what you're asked to do when you're there is what the main thing we say is, what would you like us to do when we come back? And the Palestinians always say to us, we need you to amplify our voices, to go back, see what you say, what you have seen, and talk about what your experience of being here, but tell people what you've seen. So on our return, we talk about, well, how can we do this? And one of the ways that we've done that since we very first went is to have more delegations. And we've thought quite carefully about how to have those delegations. And we have set up this system of having 2 a year, one in the October half term and one in the February half term. And we've thought carefully about those, and we have set them up so that we have covered now, I think, every region in the union, so that we've got coverage across the country. So if people need speakers, we know we've got speakers across the country that people can call on to talk about what they have seen, so that they can amplify those voices. We have also made links with people internationally and taken people from other countries with us. So we took people from the Chicago Teachers Union with us on one of those delegations. We've also taken people from other unions with us, from the EIS and from UCU. So we are moving into other unions as well. So all of this is about us going as wide as we can and showing that solidarity and doing that. So that's one of the ways we've amplified the voices, by getting as many people as we can there to get those people to come back and talk to as many people as possible. But the best way to get those voices heard is to get actual Palestinians to speak. And we thought, as teachers, the best way to get those voices heard was to get children to talk to children. And we thought that would be really powerful. And we were really lucky that we made a partnership with EduKid to make some films. And then we also made some films as the NUT at the time as well. And Louise is going to post those films there. So the films are Palestinian children talking about their lives, what their daily lives are like. There are 4 films. My Name is Sally, Moving Freely, Just Like You, and Our Land. Now, and then each one of those has teaching resources to go with them. We are currently updating those teaching resources, and some of them, and it's not easy to get hold of them at the moment, but all those teaching resources are based on the UN rights of a child. And actually, if as teachers, it's not difficult for you to watch those films and think about the UN rights of a child and think, right, I know the UN rights of a child. I know how watching those films, I could link those to the UN rights of a child. And there are lots of books about the UN rights of a child that are easily child accessible to. I'm a primary school teacher, so you'll have to bear with me being a primary school teacher. So there are books like this one that you can use that have beautiful illustrations of the UN, of different rights of the child, done by lots of renowned children's illustrators. So this is a really nice book, and it also has the UN rights put in them. And there's another one here as well. But there's other versions of these as well. So you can explore the UN rights of a child with the children that you teach. You can watch those films, and then you can explore whether their rights are being met. And just doing that is one way of using those films. With Saleh, My Name is Saleh, we really explored the right to education, the whole issue of, does he have the right to education? Does he have the right to a safe home, the right to play, the right to privacy? All those are issues that you can explore through that film. It's also got in it just a heartbreaking moment when we asked him about on his journey and the various things that happened to him. And there are some things that happened to him. And we say, how does it make you feel and he looks straight into the camera and he says, "I feel nothing." And when he did that, the person who was talking to him, because it was done in Arabic, he said, "I'll do that again and I'll ask him again." And we said, "No, this child at 10 feels nothing about these things that are happening to him." And for us going into school, that's a talking point. How can a 10-year-old feel nothing about these awful things that are happening to him? We would talk to the children in our school about that and why at 10, these things that are happening to him that would be so shocking for our children. Why would he feel nothing about that? So those are the sorts of things that we would talk about. In Just Like Us, the film that Louise mentioned, it's all about the right. These are children's rights. They're in the UN Declaration of Rights. The right to an identity, the right to say what they think and to express their opinions and have them taken seriously. These are all in this UN rights that every country has signed up to. There's only 2 countries that haven't, the United States and South Sudan. And the right to share information. It's also got some work in there about encouraging children to set up their own campaigns about anything. You take something that you're passionate about and set up a campaign about it. In Moving Freely, this is a film about dance, and it's the sort of joy of dance and how much dance can make you feel so amazing. But it's also about the right to play and the right to have access to your own language, your own culture, your own customs, and your own religion. And these things are so important. And all of this you can get from those films yourself. You don't necessarily need the teaching resources to do this. And the final one, Our Land, is about the right to have a say in what affects you, and also just the rights generally of children. Watching that film, you can just see how so many of their rights are denied to them. Now, all the resources, once we've updated them, and we are working very hard to do that at the moment, they have everything you need there for them. So everything we have put or suggested in them is there. All the links, all the videos, all the poems, all the music, the maps, everything. The actual teaching materials in there is still fine. Everything is still up to date, everything. But some of the background information and some of the figures just need some updating. And that's what we're working on at the moment. So we will get that back onto the website as soon as possible. EduKid, who is the charity that we worked with, their films and resources may well be accessible through their own website. But it's not just about distinct teaching. So there's also the fact that you can teach your children, or you can just ensure that they know that Palestine is a place and the Palestinians are a people. So it's, I've got a photograph of me at sea level as you drive before we go down into on one of the journeys. So when I'm doing negative numbers, sometimes I say, oh, look, this is me at sea level, and it's putting negative numbers into context. And I talk about, this is when I'm in Palestine, I'm standing at sea level. If I go below it, this is negative numbers. It's nothing, but it's me, and it's putting Palestine on the map. Quite often we talk about favorite books, and we talk about traveling the world through books and doing those sorts of things in primary schools. This is one of my all-time favorite books. And it's a story about a young girl who goes to visit her grandmother, and it's just a story. And it's really only at the end that you realize it is a story about a child who's visiting her grandmother in Palestine. Again, a beautiful story. And at the very end of the story, she writes a letter to the UN Secretary General. And at the end of the letter, it says, I vote for peace. I hope you vote for peace with me. I have to say, generally, I can't get to the end of that letter without a high level of emotion. But that is a beautiful story. This is another amazing book, which I know has been, there's a pack being developed by Kiri, and they've got it in, I think, the Tower Hamlets library system. A very good book that can be used. But I also think things around Christmas, making sure that you talk about the places and where they are and what it's like at Christmas, making sure in food tech that if you're talking about where foods are from, you attribute them to the right places, and you use some amazing, when we go, we eat brilliantly, I'm just saying, but use some of those lovely fresh recipes and amazing things. And I'll stop there because I'm just starting to feel hungry and thirsty from thinking about the food, but I'm happy to answer some more questions later. Thanks very much.
No problems. Thanks, Philippa. That was so informative, and I've posted the links to the YouTube films so people can get those. But I know Alex has posted that we will email those out, so don't worry if you don't get to download them. And Alex has also posted the link to the EduKid site. I think you have to register with EduKid to be able to access the resources, but they're more than happy for people to do that, and the resources are brilliant. I don't know if you want to type the names of those books into the chat, Philip. Somebody's already just said, I would love a list of books. So if you could just type those in, then we can obviously email those around as well. And obviously, if people have got resources, please do share them, because I think people are really, really wanting, a little piece of ground is the last one that Philippa showed, which is an absolutely brilliant story for using in schools. So please do share any resources you've got. I know Alex, a teacher in Alex's area, has produced a PowerPoint, which they're just updating and they'll circulate. And we have some guidance from the union on the conflict. And I know Alex has posted a slightly amended version of that. And again, thanks to Kiri Tunks, because I think Kiri has done the work on getting that updated. So brilliant. Okay, so we're moving to our next speaker, who is Naomi Wimborne-Idrissi. As I say, she's a long-time activist in the union, but also in JVL, Jewish Voice for Labour, and she has attended a delegation. In fact, I went with her. It was a very lovely delegation. I've got some very lovely photos of Naomi. So Naomi, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Louise. It was very nice to say that you came with me. It was very much the other way around. Wonderful. Yes, well, this is such a brilliant idea, this meeting, and I've been really inspired by the people, Muniza and Philippa, and all those wonderful resources, some of which I did recognise, Philippa, the films and some of the books, fantastic stuff. Just quickly on the significance of the situation we're currently in now. I mean, I think everybody listening here probably is aware, but obviously it's really significant that we've now seen protests that spread across the Palestinian populace. So it's not just Gaza, it's not just in the West Bank, it's people within towns and cities inside Jerusalem, inside 48 Israel as well, which is significant. Also starting to see some cracks in the liberal consensus, even including within the US Democratic Party, which has been so uncritical of Israel in the past. And there's this worldwide outrage, which obviously we're part of, and that's why we're here. Some obvious forms of solidarity that we can give as activists and trade unionists. Well, the NEU delegations are legendary, and obviously they play a huge role, very positive role. We can all get our NEU branches, our local associations, to affiliate to Palestine Solidarity Campaign. We can all encourage the election of international solidarity officers in our associations. I'm one for Waltham Forest, and it gives me an opportunity to get to know about and feedback to our members about a whole range of solidarity issues, but including Palestine. And now more than ever, I think I have to say, it's becoming increasingly clear that we need to be part of an international movement for boycott, divestment and sanctions. That international pressure is the only thing that's going to ever make a difference to the fate of the Palestinian people and the Israeli people as well, because, you know, no justice, no peace, it's a slogan, but it is true. As teachers within our schools, I'm now retired, but something that Philippa was saying just there, and Louise actually made me think of when I was primary school teacher till just a few years ago. And at Christmas, I managed to set up some links with a charity that I'd met on an earlier visit to Palestine, who were able to put us in touch with local families. So we got children aged about 7 writing letters to each other. And they were from Bethlehem. Sorry, it's very important to say they were from Bethlehem. And our head teacher read out one of them in assembly, and it was an assembly where parents were present. And he said that afterwards he'd had at least one parent saying, "Oh, Bethlehem, I didn't even realize it was a real place," you know. They didn't realize it. And the fact that there are children there, Christian Palestinian children included, who were sharing the same sort of celebrations around Christmas time as our kids was really a great thing to do. So telling those Palestinian stories is absolutely vital, linking up the kids. Getting a bit more serious, we've really got to be aware of how the mainstream Middle East narrative can fuel prejudice against our Jewish and Muslim students, and also between them, of course. What Muniza said addressed that beautifully, actually, with her being able to work with a Jewish colleague to spread some serious learning about this situation. But we have to be very clear that, of course, it's not a religious conflict, and this is such a misapprehension that many people have, and it's bound to be present among our students. Also, that it's not anti-Semitic to question Israel, but it is anti-Semitic to blame Jews for Israel's crimes and for the plight of the Palestinian people. And I'd just like to say that Jewish Voice for Labour can help, actually, quite significantly with helping people feel more at ease about these issues. They are incredibly sensitive. Anybody who's in the Labour Party will know that it's virtually impossible to talk about Palestine without worrying that you won't get a knock on the door the following day. We have a website which is very educational. We run education sessions, and we understand that small scale, you know, it could be from a dozen to up to 40 or 50 people online if need be, in person when that's possible again. And it's a question of generating open, honest discussion, you know, giving people the space to raise questions with people who know all the history and the background and can deal with people's unease and concerns and worries about why it's wrong to say certain things and why certain things are very offensive and so on. By the way, we don't go for zero tolerance. Zero tolerance is such a pat phrase. It's not good educational or pedagogical theory. You know, you don't drive out people who have bad ideas. You tackle the ideas and the misunderstandings through openness and honest discussion. Yeah, somebody's already mentioned the conflict in the Middle East guidance, which I think was produced by the NUT and has been updated by Kiri now as for NEU use. So I don't need to mention that. Something specific about secondary schools. I mean, obviously, if you're talking about Middle East conflict, Middle East history, you've got to be sure that the materials you're using are as unbiased as it is possible to be. I mean, we know there's no such thing as complete objectivity in these situations, but we want to know that our texts are as honest and reliable as is possible. And I think you probably all heard about a current alarming issue about Pearson's being obliged to pause distribution for two books, Conflict in the Middle East and The Middle East Conflict, Crisis and Change, which apparently read by thousands of GCSE and international GCSE students internationally. And this text has been changed in detail at the behest of UK Lawyers for Israel, with no acknowledgement whatsoever. So these books are published, they could be in your schools if you're secondary school teachers, without anybody being any the wiser. There's a report by two Middle East experts in the British Committee for the Universities of Palestine, two academics, who found hundreds of changes in these books, averaging 3 changes per page, with the result that the books have been rendered dangerously misleading and not fit for purpose. I know the executive at our union has expressed concern, and I don't know if somebody's in a position to update us there, if they've had any helpful response from Pearson. There are some good reports, which, if it's okay with the organisers, I could pop in the chat. The Independent carried a story, and there's a website called The Analyst, which has quite sophisticated take on this whole issue of you know, the reliability of our text. And there is a petition run by Miriam Shah, a colleague who some of you may know. Anyway, I'll stop there. I hope we can have a really good discussion, because there's some fantastic issues to bat about between us today. Thank you very much. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Naomi. Very informative as always. I won't. Other exec members in the meeting may want to comment about the Pearson. If they don't, I'll mention where we're up to with that in summing up at the end, as I was as I moved the motion around that went to the executive. Just somebody has posted something in the chat about the incident with a child with shouting out something. And I think this is one of the things that we need to think about. One, I tend not to respond to events that get publicized on social media until I've investigated the facts. And I think we have to be careful and make sure. Often things are put up very quickly. We don't have all the facts. Sometimes we respond and say, this is terrible. I've actually been in touch with somebody that works in that school and it's not quite as it seems. So I think, you know, yes, if that had been as it was said in the original post, we would all be shocked by that. But it is important that we make sure wherever we're challenging things, we know the facts, we know exactly what has happened, and that we're supporting all of our colleagues in schools. But as I say, I think it's really important that we know what actually has happened. So our final speaker, and then we are going to open up for contributions, is Alex Snowdon. Alex is from Newcastle. Well done on the last couple of Saturdays, Alex. It looks amazing, I have to say. Alex is an NEU member, very active in the union, but also very active in Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And I've been up to Newcastle on a number of occasions to speak at events that he has organised. I know you do fantastic work, so we're really looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks, Alex.
Great, and thank you, Louise, for the huge support you have given us, and congratulations as well on the fantastic Nottingham demonstrations you've been central to over the last couple of weeks. This is a nationwide movement, and I think rightly there's been a lot of focus on the two absolutely huge London demonstrations over the last couple of weekends. But through the movement, through PSC in particular, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which has over 60 branches nationwide, over 6,000 members, and hundreds more people joining all the time. At the moment, we are building a national movement, and that is part of a global movement. I think we all take inspiration, don't we, from the extraordinary wave of demonstrations that we have seen over the last 2 weeks around the world. And the Palestinians themselves are resisting, and Naomi's referred to this, that Palestinian resistance is increasing. And that's not simply within the occupied territories in the West Bank and Gaza, which have been occupied since 1967. It is Palestinians who live as second-class citizens in Israel, subjected to a huge number, over 50 discriminatory laws, subject to racism and inequality. They are resisting. The Palestinian refugees, particularly in countries like Lebanon and Jordan, but elsewhere around the world, are standing up and making their voices heard. And that is a reminder, first of all, that Palestine has never simply been about the occupation. The occupation is horrendous since 1967, and we demand its end. But Palestine is an even bigger question than that. It goes back to 1948 and the Nakba, the catastrophe, the ethnically cleansed Palestinians that drove Palestinians out of their own land, that drove Palestinians out of their own homes and turned them into refugees. I do recommend, as well as somebody in the chat has put Bernard Regan's excellent book on the Balfour Declaration, I recommend that to understand the prehistory of this before 1948, and in particular Britain's horrendous role as a colonial sponsor of the Zionist settlement project and then Israel itself. I do recommend that. And also this book, I would say, Ilan Pape's book, 10 Myths About Israel, is a very powerful myth buster. It has a lot of great historical material, but all geared towards addressing the arguments that we come up against today. And the two things I really want to comment on in this brief time, one is the importance of understanding what is happening, understanding the truth. And the truth is getting out more and more about Palestine. Those of us who have visited Palestine already knew that it is apartheid, that Israel is practicing. It has been confirmed for us in two very important reports recently. The leading Israeli human rights organization, B'Tselem, in January, published a report which said Israel is guilty of apartheid. The first time it explicitly stated that. Just in the last few weeks, we've seen a very important new report from one of the world's leading human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch, also saying the very same thing and providing a wealth of evidence to back that up. It's manifested in 1,000 ways on the ground. I remember when I first visited in 2011, which was organised by CADFA, the Camden Aberdoos Friendship Association, a hugely informative and profound experience. Everyone who visits Palestine on Solidarity delegation says two things. One, it absolutely shakes you up, very powerful, and also you learn a huge amount from it, and that was true for me. One of the things that really struck me was something as simple as the fact that there were separate roads for the settlers in the West Bank, the Israeli settlers, to the ones that the Palestinians were using. These settlers were using the roads that had often been there for a long time, were the quickest and most direct route, and Palestinians were being forced to go ridiculously long journeys from one place to another. And something as simple as that, but it's there in 1,000 ways, is part of that apartheid system. So we need to understand the reality of that. And we need to understand what is happening in Gaza and in the West Bank, but that it's a wider question. And the Gaza Return March 3 years ago put back onto the agenda the question of the right of return. Many Palestinians themselves will say the most fundamental right that has been denied to them is the right of return. And that is absolutely crucial in terms of human rights. The other thing that I want to say something about is promoting solidarity. The demonstrations are incredibly important, but we need to build on that. It's not always the case that Gaza is under direct assault, although of course it is always the case that Gaza is under siege, and it has been since 2007. And that's one of our key objectives as a movement, is to end that siege. But at quieter times, at times when the media's attention isn't on Palestine, what we do matters. And PSC is particularly crucial, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, for having an ongoing movement. And one of the key principles of it is that it's broad. It unites everyone, irrespective of any other differences, who cares about Palestine and stands for justice for Palestine. And I want to pick up on what Naomi said about BDS. The boycott, divestment and sanctions movement is the global movement in solidarity with Palestinians. And we are part of it, and we need to build it. It comes from a Palestinian call in 2005, where 170 civil society groups of Palestinians issued a joint call, a united call, for the rest of the world to support them through BDS. So this is what Palestinians themselves are asking us to do. It's about holding Israel to account, but it's also about holding our own government to account, because our government should be imposing sanctions, should be stopping selling arms to Israel, and should be taking action. I think we in this country have a very special duty because of that history, the Balfour Declaration, everything that followed that. We have a duty in this country to hold our own government to account and to put pressure on Israel. So just finally, get involved in PSC. Please join it. Please try to get your district affiliated to PSC. Invite speakers, particularly people who've been on the Solidarity delegations before, to speak to your own district. Hopefully, once this pandemic is over, we can get back to having those delegations, get on one of those, and then do the job that we've already heard about from people who've been on those delegations, of feeding that back, of talking about it. Because what Palestinians say is, when you go back home, tell our stories, get our truth across. And that is what we absolutely need to do. So trade unionists have to be central to the movement for Palestine Solidarity. We have a fantastic track record in the NEU. Let's build on that and make sure that we are a leading part of this country's movement and the global movement for Palestine.
Thanks so much, Alex. Really clear, and you're doing brilliant work. We